Good morning, I'm Gretchen Ho. It is a Wednesday, the 9th day of July, bringing you Morning Matters because your morning's matters get to the stories that matter today. Classes in some areas of Metro Manila and nearby provinces, including Cavite and Laguna, are suspended today following the heavy rains brought by the Habagat, which caused flooding last night. Pag-asa is also monitoring a low-pressure area outside the Philippine Area of Responsibility. More lawmakers are pushing to regulate online gambling, while some have proposed to just ban it altogether. However, a legal expert in gaming policy warns that an outright ban may do more harm than good. And the Philippine Navy is now just waiting for the DOJ's go signal to conduct its first technical dive in Taal Lake, where the bodies of missing sabongeros were allegedly disposed. But due to the weather conditions, submersible drones that can go as deep as 200 meters will likely be deployed first. Welcome to our program, Morning Matters, where we talk about the issues you need to know for the rest of your day. Now, first on the agenda. Several areas in Metro Manila experienced flooding due to heavy rains brought by the southwest monsoon or Habagat. In Mandaluyong, floodwaters swamped roads in San Joaquin and Maisilo Circle, leaving commuters stranded and disrupting traffic. Rescuers used boats to assist stranded residents, while others improvised ways to get through the flood. The inclement weather prompted suspension of classes in several areas. In the National Capital Region, Muntinlupa suspended classes at all levels in public schools, while Las Piñas canceled face-to-face classes at all levels in both public and private schools. Nearby provinces including Cavite, Laguna, and Batangas issued similar suspension orders in select areas. Meanwhile, Pag-asa is monitoring a low-pressure area outside the Philippine Area of Responsibility, though it noted the system is unlikely to develop into a tropical depression within the next 24 hours. Meanwhile, more lawmakers are now pushing to regulate online gambling in the Philippines. The Department of Finance, on the other hand, is proposing higher taxes on online gambling. Here is the report.
A jeepney driver named Jerry claims he lost 20,000 pesos to online gambling. Now he says he deeply regrets it.
Papaload ako ng halagang 300. Minsan mananalo, tapos mauubos din.
Former OFW named Don also got hooked on online gambling, so much so that he neglected his job. He says he lost all his savings and was forced to return to the Philippines, only to spiral further into addiction. Now he spends his earning as a delivery rider on online betting.
Mismong pangrenta po ng aming bahay na rarentahan, equivalent po sa peso ay 35,000. Na-cash in ko po yun. Siguro 3 times na tatlong buwan na renta. Ang alam ng magulang ko ay naibayad ko sa monthly dues ng bahay. Hindi nila alam, susugal ko. Hanggang sa na-discover na nila.
Because of their regret, both Jerry and Don support a total ban on online gambling in the Philippines. This aligns with a proposed measure filed by Senator Mig Zubiri. Meanwhile, Senator J.V. Ejercito prefers stricter regulation rather than an outright ban. He believes online gambling is an even bigger problem than Pogo.
Ito, mismong Pilipino, nauubos yung kanilang kinikita para po sa pagtaya. So yun, I think mas malaki yung social consequence.
Ejercito's bill specifically seeks to prohibit the use of all e-wallets for online gambling. Currently, it's easy for players to use these apps, which are directly linked to gambling platforms. Still, Ejercito is open to the idea of a total ban if regulation doesn't work.
Wallet applications should not allow their applications to be the conduits to online gaming or online gambling operations. Baka makabawas, pero kung talagang hindi pa rin, then we have to resort to total ban.
Just like Ejercito, Senator Win Gatchalian also proposed a ban on using e-wallets for online gambling. Senator Risa Hontiveros and Akbayan Party List filed a similar bill in the House, the Contra Isugal Act. Their proposal includes age restrictions, with only individuals 21 years old and above may register and participate. In a message to News 5, GCash stated that the entire fintech industry is working together on a unified response to the issue. They reaffirmed their commitment to protecting consumers and promoting safe, inclusive, and responsible digital finance. At a palace briefing, Press Officer Claire Castro said the Department of Finance proposed taxing online gambling instead.
Pag-aaralan po yan dahil baka sabihin naman nila, nako, ang freedom of expression na naman ang, sinasawata natin dyan.
But Senator Zubiri pushed back, saying taxation isn't the solution.
Bakit dito tayo nakatutok sa online gambling? Baon ng utang ang ating mga kababayan, yan po ang maling advokasya ng ating gobyerno.
PAGCOR Chairman Alejandro Tenco opposed calls for a total ban on online gambling in the country, asserting that stricter regulations should be implemented instead. Tenco shared that PAGCOR is set to sign a memorandum of agreement with the Ad Standards Council to regulate outdoor billboards promoting online gambling platforms. He also emphasized the importance of the industry as a revenue source, citing PAGCOR's collection of around 50 billion pesos in licensing fees in 2024, with half allocated directly to social services.
I had made my stand clear. PAGCOR is for the retention with the stricter regulations instead of total banning. In 2024, we were able to collect more or less 50 billion pesos. And 50% of that automatically goes to social services. That includes the Universal Healthcare Act, yung PhilHealth po. So, malaki po ang napupunta ron. May napupunta po sa Philippine Sports Commission. May napupunta po sa Dangerous Drug Board. May napupunta po niyan sa DOJ para po dun sa mga nakulong na hindi naman dapat nakulong.
An outright ban on online gambling may do more harm than good. That is, according to a legal expert in gaming law and policy. That is Attorney Tonet Kyoge, founder of Arden Consult, an advisory and consulting firm specializing in regulatory guidance for businesses. And she is joining us today via Zoom to discuss this matter. Magandang umaga po sa inyo, Attorney.
Hello, Gretchen. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Just reading your paper on a legal perspective on online gambling in the Philippines. You put the disclaimer that you work with some of these gambling companies through complex PAGCOR application processes. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Gretchen.
All right, it's good to...
And I think working with them, and I hope people know that it's not that easy to get a PAGCOR license, because I think that's the perspective that people are seeing now. Na napakadaling kumuha ng lisensya, so anyone can just do it. But that's very, very far from the truth.
Okay. I won't discuss if you're for a total ban or not, because you've already gone public with your push for stronger regulation instead. Instead, I wanted to dissect what you meant when you said that a smart regulation should be done in the online gambling industry in the Philippines. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by smart regulation?
I think, well, first of all, I commend the efforts of our legislators. I know they are just doing their jobs, right? They see, I guess they hear these mga interviews, man on the streets, right? So they need to react. But I guess what I mean by smart regulation is really lawmaking, Gretchen, that's based on facts, data, and also lessons from other countries. Because let's be real, right? Like online gaming is not like drugs or guns that you can just confiscate. It's on the internet. So, I mean, is it even realistic for government to monitor every phone or every laptop? There are countries like China, Indonesia, Vietnam. Here, there are total bans, right? But the data shows that illegal sites, they just thrive. I'm not sure those who have traveled to these countries, paglaan mo pa lang ng plane, you already get messages from illegal gambling sites. So how is it that these countries that have imposed a ban, illegal gambling websites are still able to reach people? right? So, and then I guess second is the data. It's very clear that banning will only drive people to these illegal websites where there are zero controls, no protection, right? I'm glad to hear, I guess earlier that Senator J.V. Ejercito wants to study it. I also heard in an interview with Senator Zubiri that even if he is for a total ban, he did mention that he wants the government to study the data. So I'm very confident that they do. They will see that illegal gambling it's really the enemy. Third, I mean, what do we already have? Tingnan po sana natin the rules of PAGCOR. Like, for example, legal age is already 21. So it doesn't make sense siguro to have a law that that raises the legal gambling age to 21. There are already KYC, mga self-exclusion monitoring tools, all under PAGCOR. What is more practical, maybe, Gretchen, is to improve the existing system. Online gambling in the Philippines has only been regulated for maybe the last 3-4 years. So it's still really in its infancy, it's still maturing. So let's not kill it with knee-jerk laws when there's still so much things to be done for smarter enforcement. And as I said, nga, like smarter regulation.
Isn't it more difficult to enforce regulation in the online space? Given na sinabi po ninyo, no, meron naman tayong legal age for gambling, which is 21. But to be able to prove your age would be much more difficult, and to be able to catch kung sino man yung naglalaro, mas lalo pang mahirap, no? Isn't it also a good recommendation to make it harder for Filipinos to access these gambling platforms? What do you think about that part? Is that a reasonable ask for you from the public?
I think the accessibility definitely is an issue if that is, I guess, the question that that is being posed right now to legislators. But the issue kasi, Gretchen, is if you make it too hard for people to access the legal sites, then what are they going to do? They're just going to go to the illegal sites. So I think the steps should be fight illegal gambling first. Make sure, like everyone who's gambling, right? Because the gambling is as you said, it's there, right? And I heard someone say it's a necessary evil. So it's there. Drive them first. Remove all of the illegal gambling sites. Drive them to the legal sites, right? So nandun na sila, and that's when you impose the regulations, because at least they're already like in a sandbox, right? They're already in a place where you can monitor them and regulate them, rather than they're there, out and the government is unable to even monitor or see how these gambling sites are working. So I think it can be a two-step process, and definitely regulation is still key.
Okay. What is legal gambling? What does legal gambling look like, and what does an illegal gambling company? How do they act? I mean, for us, it's just the same, right? When we see a website, when we see ads, parang hindi talaga namin napapansin, or we don't even take the time. Some people think it's even a scam, but how do we discern if the website is legal or not?
So, and it's a very good question, Gretchen, because legally, a legal online gambling website should have the PAGCOR logo. So PAGCOR is the only regulator for all online gambling. So dapat tingnan muna natin kung may PAGCOR logo, right? Although, I mean, because nga I work with some of these companies, they sometimes report, right, na they're being cloned, right? Even the PAGCOR logo is being used. So there is also, PAGCOR in its website has a list of the legal online gambling websites, right? There are also other red flags, Gretchen. Like, for example, the only payment method is crypto. They don't have terms and conditions. They don't have customer service. Like, you can't call anyone. So I think those are the red flags that you can also look at, right? Because again, these websites, sometimes they're not even gambling sites. They just take your money, right? And then they run away. These are the causes of mga suicides in Indonesia. So, and let me make it clear, if you're scammed on an illegal site, there's no more legal recourse. You can't go to PAGCOR. they're offshore. Most of them are untraceable. That's why it's so crucial to stick to the regulated platforms. If it's legal and under PAGCOR, you can file a complaint. I understand a lot of the complaints are handled and are resolved. And then, the operator can be penalized or shut down. That's in the PAGCOR rules. So kahit pa paano regulation, it still gives you protection. Yung mga illegal sites talaga, they offer zero.
But what does the PAGCOR have now in its regulation? You mentioned yun nga, yung customer service representative. There is a complaint mechanism, terms and conditions. But how about the betting loss limits? Is that in place or wala pa rin talaga?
So there are minimum requirements as to how much you can deposit, that you are required to deposit on the first hand, right? So it already sets a bar na hindi naman pwedeng like 1 peso, like you bet, right? PAGCOR also has self-exclusion rules wherein you are allowed to exclude yourself from betting for a certain period. It also requires very strict UKYC requirements that they impose on the operators, that you have to really be you have to present your ID, you have to show that you are of legal age, that you're not part of, kasi meron din mga excluded classes, right? Like government officials cannot. My understanding is people like military officers also cannot, right? Police. So they're very strict with this, and there are also time limits, right? Like you have to provide this information within 72 hours, or else the operator is required to either shut down your account or you can't withdraw. So the imposition is both on the operator, yung may license, and also the player.
Okay, but yesterday, Chairman Altenco has already agreed to change the name of online gaming to online gambling. I mean, making it very,
Yes.
very straightforward that this is gambling. So, I want to know, to you, how would responsible gambling look like? Because usually po nakakita tayo ng ads, parang may nakalagay na disclaimer, be a responsible gamer. Ngayon, it's gonna be a
Yes.
responsible gambler. For you, what would that look like? I mean, in studying the best case scenarios abroad and how they regulate the industry, how would responsible gambling look like?
So first of all, responsible gambling, it's knowing your limits, right? So I guess very, very taking a step back, you have to first gamble in the legal websites, right? So it's really education that these are the regulated sites that are allowing online gaming. The second is knowing your limits. Really educating people that gambling is not, you are not guaranteed to win, right? So that kasama na rin dyan, Gretchen, yung mga ads ngayon, diba? Bawal yan sa PAGCOR. You can't say that, oh, you're guaranteed to win. Actually, there are requirements to say that, there are no guarantees to winning, right? You can lose all your money. So I think more of education on being responsible as to setting limits for yourself, whether you work with the operator or the regulator, and allowing them to set limits. And then it's also educating yourself na this is not guaranteed. There is also, I think, what Chairman Tenko also wants to do is work with these mga influencers, these celebrities who also, are considered maybe endorsers or affiliates of these companies, that they can't give the message that, for example, the reason why they are doing well in life is because they went to this gambling site and then they gambled, right? So it's really educating the player that gaming is that can be addicting, as the new PAGCOR logo and slogan should have now. And that second, you should check yourself, right? And then third is that you should set limits because, gambling is addicting. But that there are also rules that have to be followed to be able to play responsibly.
Okay, but when it comes to fair play, how does PAGCOR monitor that? And how for example, when it comes to advertising, you also mentioned that several endorsers are promoting these illegal gambling websites. How do we have or enforce stricter regulation on that? How can PAGCOR adapt to all of these loopholes in the legal framework that we have? Because you already mentioned, too, that stricter enforcement is the greater need rather than more laws on this.
Yes. So the reason why I think advertising is important, and I guess it's something that maybe is really the focus of a lot of our regulators right now, is that it has a tendency to attract the people that it should not attract, right? So the children. I think one of the criticisms is that all of these billboards, some of the commercials, some of the programs, they're the ones that are seen by the minors, right? So I think that is one of the things that Chairman Altenco would like to emphasize, right? Although PAGCOR kasi is also just the regulator of gaming, right? The reason why they are working with the Ad Council is because they are the ones that should, they are the ones that are really mandated to enforce and to provide for stricter rules on advertising. So the goal is to ensure that the advertising materials don't appeal to the people or the minors that they are not supposed to appeal to, right? Because even if, I guess there are studies, right? Even if they are not allowed to gamble, assuming that it's very strict, right? They cannot be able to gamble. You also don't want, I think, for them to have the idea that gambling is like gaming is like the way that they see games, right? That it's entertainment for them as a kid, because you don't want to, I guess, instill that in them. So that is one of the things that Chairman Tenko would like to emphasize. That's why we can expect, I think, stricter regulations when it comes to online gaming. And going back to what is already there are actually already rules. If you read the PAGCOR rules, there are very strict rules on marketing. I think what the Ad Council is going to do is just be very specific. Kasi, Gretchen, most of the rules on advertising is on land-based casinos, right? So, for example, like land-based casinos, they're not allowed to, if you notice their billboards, they don't show slot machines, they don't show the gaming places, right? Yung mga roulette, they don't show that. They only show the hotel and the other facilities, because that is actually in the rules. However, in online gaming, although it is alluded in the rules, hindi siya very specific. So my understanding is that's what they're going to work on now, right? To be more specific, that the advertisements on gaming now is very is also not going to attract that certain kind of demographic that will drive them directly to gaming, but only maybe siguro some brand awareness to also make people know na may important din yung advertising, because it also allows people to know what legal sites are, what are the legal sites, because as I said, these illegal gambling sites, they're not going to be allowed to put up a billboard in EDSA because nagtatago nga sila in the shadows, right? So I think another point of smart regulation with respect to advertising is how do you use it to drive people to the legal sites and to make sure they are not scammed and not targeting that the minor. So those are, I think, things that they can still explore before even imposing a total ban.
Okay, we will throw your concerns over to our lawmakers because we have one next on the line. But in the meantime, maraming salamat. This certainly merits a nuanced discussion of how the industry works before actually deciding on enforcement and new laws. Maraming salamat. We have Attorney Tonette Kyoge, founder of Arden Consult, joining us today. And speaking of lawmakers, Senator Sherwin Gatchalian is one of those pushing for a stricter regulation of online gambling. And to discuss his position, we have Senator Win joining us today via Zoom. Magandang umaga po sa inyo, Senator. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Gretchen. Good morning to our televiewers.
Okay, Senator Win, alam po natin na talagang masigabo ang diskusyon dito sa pagdating sa online gambling, and you are one of the lawmakers calling for stricter measures instead of a total ban. Have you changed your mind on this amid the debates?
Well, we went through a thorough analysis and research, Gretchen, before we took the path of stricter regulation. Indeed, there are two ways of addressing this online gambling. One is to total ban it. Two is to enforce strict regulations through law. Right now, we have regulations. I heard Attorney Tonette mentioned about PAGCOR, there are regulations right now, but obviously the regulations are not working. Pumapalpak yung regulations. It's not being enforced strictly. Penalties are not being imposed. Therefore, these online gambling platforms are not following the rules or following the regulations. So what we went with is stricter regulations, because when we studied online gambling in other jurisdictions, it's very hard to block websites because they go underground. And when you have total ban of e-gaming or e-gambling in the country, our fear, our concern is they might go underground, and it's more difficult to regulate them if they go underground. In fact, they fly under the radar, and regulation will not be imposed anymore. And it will be a cat and mouse game from then on. It will be very difficult for us to monitor how many are offering gambling platforms, how many are going into gambling. It becomes a very unwieldy situation.
An addictive cycle.
Correct. So it's better for these companies, if they don't want to be imposed penalties or even put in jail in our bill, they would come out in the open and make themselves or allow themselves to be regulated, meaning they go legal. But of course, when you go legal, there are certain rules that you have to follow. And but the point there is that they're now within the radar of the government, as opposed to going underground. It's very difficult. If you follow other gambling other gambling forms, for example, hueteng. When we tried to ban hueteng, it just went underground. And what happened is it's still operating. It proliferated in some areas, and it became unwieldy. And corruption actually was the next event, because enforcers were being corrupted so that they will close their eyes and allow hueteng to flourish. So we don't want that to happen with online gambling.
Senator, kung matatandaan po natin yung usapan ng online gambling, nagsimula po yan dahil pagkatapos nung Pogo ban, yung iba sinasabi nagpunta dito sa online gambling or sa IGLs. They shifted markets from serving offshore gamblers. Now, it is the Filipinos that are the ones betting their money into this. Kumbaga parang tayo naman bigla yung naapektuhan at dito napunta. Senator Zubiri says that taxing them would not be the answer for the social ills that it will cause our kababayans, at kumikita lang tayo sa panggigipit at paghihirap ng ating mga mamamayan. In short, he's calling out for the government not to profit off moral decay. What would you say to that?
Well, the first issue about Pogos, that's hindi totoo yan, that Pogos went into online gambling. That's there's no, at least based on our information, there's no information that Pogos went to online or domestic online gambling. Pogos are totally different. Their business model is totally different from domestic online gambling. We have to differentiate yung domestic online gambling and Pogos, because Pogos get their bets outside of the Philippines. And based on our investigation last time, mostly are owned by foreign individuals or foreign criminal syndicates in this matter. Kaya na-banned ang Pogo, because they were being operated by criminal syndicates, not businessmen, but criminal syndicates. And they morphed into scamming activities. Now, Pigos, or maraming names. So may Pigo, may e-game, may online gambling. All of these are owned by domestic companies and local individuals. Hence, they have to be under the regulation of PAGCOR. And these companies, some of them are even publicly listed. So in other words, they are open for public investment. But the problem here is regulation. PAGCOR is not effectively regulating these online gambling platforms. And at the same time, these online gambling platforms are not also regulating themselves. Because part of regulation is self-regulation, meaning you impose certain moral standards to your operation so that society will be ensured that morality is maintained at all times. But hindi ganun nangyayari. In fact, tinay namin to open an account in one of the platforms. It just asks you, are you above 18 years old? And when you press yes, kaagad you can gamble as low as with 20 pesos. So that's not self-regulation. That's not regulation at all. So in our bill, we impose very strict regulation. They have to use technology to determine whether the account opener is below 18 or above 18. They will have to cross-check the identification of that individual and so on. So that's regulation. That's what we want, to impose strict regulation.
Of course, alam po natin no, na maraming anggulo dito sa stronger regulation. Meron po, yun nga po yung nabanggit po ninyo when it comes to authentication of their identity. But sa kabuuan po, ano po yung mga proposal dun po sa bill po ninyo to have a stricter regulation?
The basic components, Gretchen, number one, we will increase the age from 18 to 21. Because at 21 years old, between 18 to 21, you're still in college. So meaning, most likely, you're still getting allowance from your parents. And we don't want the allowance to go into online gambling. Number two, we will put a floor price or a floor bet. 10,000 is the floor, so you cannot go below 10,000 when you put bets. We will also decouple the use of e-wallets to online gambling. We will also prohibit celebrities to advertise, as well as advertising near schools, near churches, near public buildings. So stricter regulation. This is marami yun, no? But these are the most important features of the bill.
Pag pumupunta po kasi tayo sa sa EDSA, I mean kaliwat kanan po doon yung mga advertising at billboard no ng mga online gambling platforms, and you'd wonder, I mean where is government regulation in that? I mean, pag meron po tayo nabasa din online na sinasabi, pagdating naman sa mga ads ng mga produkto, napakahirap to get that through the Ad and Standards Council. But as of today, what regulations exist when it comes to advertising of these online gambling platforms? Do you also support stronger regulation on that?
Yes, definitely. In fact, that's built in our proposal. So by law, celebrities will not be allowed to promote this online gambling. The reason for that is, for example, we see a lot of sports personalities. These sports personalities are idols of the youth, no? Idols of senior high school students, idol of young people, and we don't want the young people to be enticed to go into online gambling. That's number one. And in the law, it's also built in. As long as children or the youth is being attracted by this ad, or as long as there are children using that facility or applying that route, then you cannot advertise. We cannot advertise to the youth because the youth are the most susceptible to online gambling. Now, going back, Gretchen, you mentioned earlier about banning. The reason why we chose the path of stricter regulation is because these gaming sites will go underground if we totally ban them. And we studied in other jurisdictions, and that's what happened. So when they go underground, or when they go under the regulation of PAGOR, it's more difficult to catch them. It's more difficult to close them down because they can close them down now, and then they'll open with another website tomorrow using the same machinery, the same hardware, and it's going to be like that all the time. So instead of these people going underground, give them a venue to go legal, but be under the strict regulation of government.
When it comes to the taxation of these online gambling platforms, do you think the government is getting enough so far? Because I did a little bit of reading on that. It seems that these companies only pay 5% franchise tax on gross revenues, 1.5% tax for social responsibility programs, pero wala silang corporate income tax or VAT. Tama po ba yun?
Yeah, because it's already subsumed under the franchise tax and the regulatory fees. Um, the online gambling now is the biggest earner of PAGCOR. Out of the 90 billion, almost 100 billion peso earnings of PAGCOR, 50 billion goes to online gaming. It surpassed the brick and mortar casinos. When I say brick and mortar, these are the ones you see in Ross Boulevard, for example, Soler, City of Dreams. These companies built facilities, rooms, convention halls, and a casino. There are hard investments to that. But now, with online gambling, they have already surpassed these brick and mortar casinos. The gross gaming revenue of this online gambling casino is as high as 150 billion pesos to date. No, it's more than half of PAGCOR's gross gaming revenue and growing so fast. We looked at the numbers in the last 5 years. The average growth rate of this online gambling is about 46%. No? So in a uncertain economy right now, 46% is really a miraculous growth in terms of business. No, so that's why you see a lot of these publicly listed companies share price going off the roof because the growth of these businesses are tremendous, but at the expense of our society. With weak regulations, you have the youth, high school students going into these gambling platforms. In fact, what prompted me to look deeper into this are the schools. Being the chairman of the Basic Education Committee, a lot of these principals, school owners sought my attention, and we analyzed the situation. That's why we came up with this stricter regulation.
Are you going to propose for revised taxation, and by how much?
There is room. With the earnings that we are seeing right now, imagine 50 billion pesos out of the 100 billion peso earnings of PAGCOR, we feel that there is room to impose taxes. Maybe slightly higher, I think. We have to study the combination because part of it goes to BIR. I think that part can be increased substantially. The regulatory fees can also be increased substantially. In our proposal, actually, some of the fees will go to recovery or gambling recovery programs. When this came out in social media, a lot of people reach out to me, and the problems with people who want to recover from gambling is it's very expensive to go into these programs. So we earmark a portion of the earnings of PAGCOR to gambling recovery programs, not only for e-gambling but for all forms of gambling.
Actually, mahaba-haba pa po yung usapan na pagdating dito sa online gambling. We don't have a lot of time today, but we will wait for that discussion over in the Senate. In the meantime, maraming salamat po, Senator Win Gatchalian, for weighing in on with us in this online gambling debate.
Thank you, Gretchen. Maraming salamat.
And when we return, Israeli ambassador to the Philippines, Ilan Fluss, will join us to discuss how recent events are shaping his work and the embassy's role in supporting the Filipino community. That and more when Morning Matters returns. Keep it here on One News. Good morning, I'm Gretchen Ho, and here at Morning Matters, we talk about the most pressing issues and give you the context behind the headlines. "25 more overseas Filipino workers arrived safely at Ninoy Aquino International Airport after availing of the government's voluntary repatriation program from Israel. They were welcomed by Migrant Worker Secretary Hans Kakdak, who said President Marcos had offered immediate reintegration support. The OFWs received financial aid from the DMW, OWA, and DSWD, along with TESDA training vouchers and medical checkups from the DOH and MIAA. Now, this group is the 39th batch repatriated from Israel, bringing the total to 1,405 Filipino workers sent home since the conflict escalated in October of 2023. U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met at the White House. Now, they talked for several hours while Israeli officials continued in direct negotiations with Hamas to secure a U.S.-brokered Gaza ceasefire. Netanyahu said the U.S. and Israel were working with other countries who would give Palestinians a better future. Trump, who initially demurred to Netanyahu when asked about the relocating of Palestinians, said the countries around Israel were helping out. The meeting was Trump's third face-to-face encounter with Netanyahu since returning to office in January. And joining us now, we have Ambassador Ilan Flus, Israel's top diplomat to the Philippines. He is here with us to talk about how recent events are shaping his work and the embassy's role in supporting the Filipino community. Welcome to Morning Matters.
Morning, Gretchen. Thank you very much for having me with you.
Well, as we know, Prime Minister Netanyahu is in Washington this week, and he just had a meeting with Donald Trump. What do we know from that meeting so far, and what were they there to flesh out?
Well, of course, we don't know the entire details. They just finished the second meeting of this visit. Of course, a meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu is very important, and mostly dealing on the Gaza issue. How can we end this conflict, which I think everybody wants to see an end, but we need to understand how it will end. And maybe there are discussions on beyond the Gaza and the Hamas issue. I think from the Israeli point of view, one of the most important points there is getting home the 50 hostages who are still held in captivity in Gaza. We know only 20 are alive, 30 were murdered. How to bring them home now? And there are still even families of the hostages who are there in Washington in order to continue with the pressure on both sides.
Of course, it has been 2 years since that conflict started, which began on October 7 in the attack of Hamas on Israeli citizens. And now the discussion is at the point where both leaders of U.S. and Israel are proposing the idea of relocating the Palestinian people from Gaza. And there are concerns that the Palestinians might be displaced from their hometown, from their homeland. What would you say to that? I mean, there are doubts, there have been doubts over Israel's intentions in the Gaza Strip. Will the Palestinians be able to come back amidst this proposal?
I think this question was also asked at the end of the previous meeting between Netanyahu and Trump. And the answer, at least from Prime Minister Netanyahu, was there's no plan to force people out of Gaza. If people would like to immigrate, we'll be trying to assist them in identifying countries that will be willing to receive them. But certainly there are no discussions and plans on forcing Palestinians to move out of Gaza. This is not the plan. It's not something to be only on a voluntary basis. If people are interested, to change the course of their life and to move to a better place.
And how do you envision this conflict to end? I mean, it has been a long 2 years already. I'm sure it is quite tiring.
There's a heavy toll, I think, on both sides. Of course, we have, Israeli soldiers are being killed in Gaza. We had the 1,200 people who were murdered by Hamas in October 7, 2023, 642 days since today. And we have still the hostages. So I think there are two basic important things from the Israeli point of view that have to be addressed. And number one is the return of the hostages. And of course, number two is to make sure that Hamas cannot attack Israel again and cannot build again a Gaza, which is a base for terrorism, for attacking Israel. And there was a missile which was launched against Israel from Gaza just 2 nights ago. So this is from one side. On the other hand, of course, how do you make sure that civilians, people that are not involved, will be able to build their own life and to thrive, to develop? The important thing, I think, for both sides is to find a solution how Hamas will not be able to continue to build, to control Gaza. If we find an alternative, which will be an alternative which accepts the existence of Israel and some kind of a status quo and coexistence. This will be the way forward. Of course, the question is who will do it, who will run Gaza. These are a lot of questions that have to be negotiated, and we're not there yet.
So a two-state solution is possible?
You know, to describe now one state, two state, or what kind of status the Palestinian side will have, how it will look, this is not something that we know. There was the Oslo process where we started working towards a Palestinian state, Palestinian authority, then Palestinian state. Unfortunately, the Oslo process, we received, in a return, Israel suffered since then so many terror attacks, and the extremist elements who are not recognizing our right to be there, and we didn't mention the Rising Lion, the operation vis-a-vis Iran, but there are so many forces and entities that do not recognize the right of Israel to exist. So from our perspective, the most important thing is recognition, is respect, is acceptance of Israel in the region. Then we can work together to find better solutions.
Of course, many have gone up in arms over what has been happening in Gaza, not just because of what has happened to Israel, but because of the human rights violations that have occurred. There are reports on the ground that say that aid has been hampered, that Israeli soldiers have been firing into aid seekers in the specific location sites. I mean, why just not leave those areas? It will leave the civilians to have access to all of these resources, and also questions on the proportionality of the response of Israel. You mentioned 1,200 Israelis were killed in October 7,
yes.
But as of today, 55,000 have been killed in Gaza.
Yes. Well, you're asking very tough questions, but good questions. And I would say, number one, it's important to check the reports that you receive and to make sure that they're accurate. Humanitarian assistance is coming into Gaza. There's a new organization which delivers direct to the people in Gaza food and different assistance. More than 50 million meals entered into Gaza through this GHF, the new organization, directly to the people, not via Hamas. Via the UN organizations, there are thousands of trucks, humanitarian assistance that came in, food, medical aid, shelter, needs are coming in truckloads. Hundreds and thousands of them are coming in. The problem is not if they're coming in or not. The problem is that the Hamas is taking over violently, forcefully, taking over this humanitarian aid, and they're doing with it, building again Hamas, and making sure that they're still powerful and controlling Gaza. So the issue is not if Israel is assisting this humanitarian assistance to come in, it is what happens when it comes in, and how efficient are the international organizations in making sure that the people who are living in Gaza are receiving this aid. So this is, I think, very, very important to recognize this. Secondly, IDF has clear instructions not to shoot, and these reports are false. IDF shoots people who are threatening the IDF soldiers or Israel. Otherwise, they do not shoot. When they are threatened, they have to respond to protect themselves. Number three, regarding the numbers, the proportionality issue, it's a complicated legal matter. It's not about how many people were died here and how many people died there. We're not comparing, and we do not want to compare. The moment that terrorists are operating from within a civilian facility, such as, and we have seen, and there's so much evidence from hospitals, from mosques, from schools, they are operating from there. Israel attacks. And as you have seen, also in Iran, our attacks are precise. And we even give early warnings before we attack in order to minimize civilian casualties. And this is coming in compromising the effectiveness of this attack and, of course, putting our own people at risk. But we are a responsible country, and we want to minimize civilian casualties. This is the IDF, because we're working according to international law. Who are we fighting? We're fighting a terror organization, Hamas, who in its charter wants to destroy Israel, and it's clearly in its charter. They are violating all international law that you can look at. These are terrorists. Now, if we take updates and information coming from a terror organization, or do you look at the information that Israel, as a responsible democratic country, gives to the international community, but our government also reports to our own people, to Israel, because we care about international law, we care about the values of the IDF and the State of Israel.
I want to shift the conversation over to what's happening in Iran. There are concerns, of course, over its uranium enrichment. Technically, under the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, it is allowed to enrich nuclear for peaceful purposes, like for nuclear power or for medical purposes. What would happen if Iran begins enriching its nuclear sites or uranium again? Will the airstrikes continue?
Well, we gave very clear goals to this operation. Iran was violating its responsibilities to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Also, according to reports of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, it was in clear violation. And the reports are, there's no doubt about it.
What exactly did it violate?
It did not allow inspectors to go into different sites. It has enriched beyond the level that you need to enrich for energy or for civil use. 60% enrichment of uranium is not something that you use, generally speaking, for civilian program. 60% is very close to the 90%. It is very easy to go up from 60 to 90%. 60% is mostly for military use. IAEA has said it very clearly that they have a military program that they are violating and they are not in compliance with the responsibility, and they are doing activities that cannot be verified, and we do not know what they are doing. We have all the intelligence which we shared about the military nuclear program. It is not a civilian nuclear program. They are working not only on enrichment, they're also working on weaponization, preparing the nuclear weapon. Iran, with the amount of the uranium, they had enough uranium for 9 nuclear bombs. In the last 3 months, this amount increased from 6 bombs to 9 bombs because they were enhancing the enrichment. They were enhancing the preparing of the weapon in order to deliver any kind of bomb. And we know who they're going to attack, because the leadership was saying again and again the same message as I mentioned before vis-a-vis Hamas. Iran was trying to annihilate the state of Israel. This is in their agenda, repeatedly stated by the leadership. And if you add to it the third element, which is the ballistic missile program, why does a country need to have 10,000 ballistic missiles? And this was the plan of Iran. Very, very few countries have such a big arsenal of missiles. This is threatening Israel, the region, and the world. And I think you heard statements from world leaders that Israel did a job that many countries were hoping which will happen, and that removed an immediate threat to the world's peace.
But if you compare the two countries, Israel and Iran, Iran is a member of the NPT, but Israel is not. Why is that so?
Well, I'm really not going to discuss here our policy vis-a-vis the NPT. But let me say that Israel has proven itself as a responsible country when dealing with weapons, when dealing with regional security issues. And I think it's important to recognize Israel is surrounded by entities and countries who do not recognize the right of Israel to exist. I mentioned Hamas from Gaza, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah from Lebanon, Assad, well, the regime of Assad collapsed after that, Iran, Shia militia, the Houthis, all trying one
But
thing.
isn't Palestine also fighting for its right to exist?
There was no occupation in Gaza before October 7, 2023, with all due respect. We moved out of Gaza. There was no occupation. So if there's no occupation, what is the reason for attacking Israel? And it's not a secret. It's not a secret. So occupation is not the issue. When we pulled out of Gaza, there was a lot of internal criticism that we're allowing the people in Gaza, the leadership in Gaza, prepare Gaza in order to attack Israel. Unfortunately, those predictions, which were not accepted by the government decided to pull out. But unfortunately, these predictions became true. So it's not an issue of occupation. Israel, since 1948, is not recognized. Our War of Independence, the day after the declaration of the independence of Israel, our countries, our surrounding neighbors, declared war in order to try to eliminate this young country of 600,000 people. Luckily enough, we survived. We won the war.
And the Philippines is actually one of those who voted in favor of the establishment of an independent state for Israel back in the 1947. Yes, correct. And you have been here for the past 4 years.
Correct.
I wanted to talk about your experience here and the good things that you've done. A lot of initiatives towards agriculture and technology. In your 4-year stay here, what would be your major accomplishments, do you think?
So, I'm a Balikbayan diplomat, so the Balikbayan ambassador, because I was here 3 years in the 90s and now 4 years, so altogether 7 years. And there's a special place for the Philippines in my heart. I think also many Israelis, I know many Israelis love the Philippines. You mentioned earlier the OFWs in Israel. There's a very special bond between the peoples and between the countries. For me, when I came here as an ambassador and now returned 4 years ago, I had a vision. My vision was, and I followed this vision from beginning almost to the end, I can talk about it, was building bridges of innovation and technology between our two countries, because Israel is a global hub of innovation. Israeli technologies are making good around the world. I mean, you mean the cherry tomato, irrigation, Stand for Your Heart, Waze, Viber, so many technologies. Every smartphone has Israeli components. So we are developing a lot of technologies. I believe that very relevant to the development of the Philippines. The main issue I discussed with President Marcos was the issue of agricultural productivity and food security. So in order to do that, we took two lines of action. From one side, working with government, and currently now we're hosting 700 interns in agriculture in Israel. Even during the war, not one of them returned back to the Philippines. They felt safe, by the way. So 700 are now in Israel. Except for working with government, we're also working with private sector. And that led to a very nice partnership between one of the big groups here, the Metro Pacific Group, with an Israeli agro company. And the biggest, for me, the biggest success, I think, is this partnership, which now is producing, I think, the best vegetables in this area. The biggest greenhouse project, 3.5 hectares, amazing produce, lettuce. And that exactly addresses the issue of food security. So I'm working as a diplomat, also as a matchmaker, an introducer. And there are also other companies who are doing now here even irrigation for rice fields. And rice, of course, is a staple, very important to have more rice, reduce the costs. So I think we're doing private sector and government. And I do see in these 4 years how we were able to create new bridges between Israel and the Philippines. And let me just, one small anecdote. During the war or the operation with Iran, Israel was under barrage attack of missiles. We had a team of Israeli doctors here working in Rizal Hospital in Pasig in introducing a women's health center which gives all services for women. So they were here working with the Philippine counterparts, and it's a partnership also with the Department of Health. At the same time, they were watching the apps on the phone on what is happening to the families in Israel that had to go into the shelter, into the safe room, so making sure the families are safe. And they were busy working here with their counterparts, continuing the important work of working with the counterparts in sharing our best practices in different areas in health.
We do hope for more news like that to make the headlines on growth progress instead of war and conflict.
Absolutely.
Right? I think we share the same boat on that. But you're ending your tenure here by the end of the month. What is your most memorable experience of the Philippines? Just to round it off.
There's so many, but I'll just say one word. It's very complicated. When the war started, after the Hamas attack on Israel, for one side, we are in a war. We have to explain our positions to tackle complicated issues, but how do we continue on the same time promoting the important agenda and the important collaborations between the two partnerships? And working in this fine line is not so simple, but it was very important for me to have continuation and at the same time also dealing with those sensitive issues. On a personal level, I would say that one of the most memorable events here was when I climbed Mount Pulag, and I was so lucky.
Because the ambassador is an athlete.
And we ran together, but really seeing the Sea of Clouds, which is very famous, almost 3,000 meters high. The scenery is beautiful, and really you see, it's not. I mean, we know about the Philippine Islands, but there's so many more things to see in the Philippines, and it was beautiful. That's, I think, on the personal level. Of course, professionally, I was lucky to be able to host here the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs in June 2023, and the visit expressed so much of the commonalities, of the friendship, especially meeting Secretary Manalo, of course, President Marcos. It was a very strong message of friendship between the two countries. So on the professional level, I think this is also was one of the peaks of my stay here.
I'm sure it was a tightrope for you, trying to be productive amidst everything that has been happening around the world. Congratulations on a good 4-year run here in the Philippines. And thank you so much for joining us today to answer the tough questions and also to update us on what has been done with the Israel-Philippines relations. Maraming salamat. We have Israeli Ambassador Ilan Flus joining us today.
Thank you.
That wraps up today's episode of Morning Matters. We hope we've given you the right start to your morning. Let's go ahead and make the day matter. My name is Gretchen Ho. We are One News, all sides, all the time.